saw. We're here with Julie Baker, founder of New York-based Ursa Space, a key partner to Empire Space, regular speaker at Space Week New York. Julie's been here for Ursa a few times now. So I'm very excited to be here doing this interview with Julie and Ursa. And like a huge thank you to Julie and Ursa Space for all that you do, for all the engagement, participation in Empire Space's events and Space Week New York and everything else. I'd like to start off with Julie doing an introduction for Ursa Space. If you could give like a quick overview of what the company does, I think that would be really helpful to set the context.
So first of all, thank you, Evan. It's really a pleasure to be here and do this with you and get a chance to talk about Ursa Space Systems. We have been around since late 2014. I am a co-founder. I joined in very early January 2015. So this is our 11th year strong. And what we do is we use geospatial AI to bring together a lot of complex satellite and spatial data and create answers about what's happening in the world where it matters. And I know that that's kind of abstract, and we'll get into a lot more specifics as you go along with your questions.
Cool. Sounds good. I think for me, when I think about Ursa, I normally think of Earth observation, but I noticed that you're careful to use language like geospatial AI, right? So I guess maybe if you could like expound on that a little bit and say what geospatial AI means and sort of what Ursa does, and if you see yourself in like if you agree that if you're within Earth observation, sort of where you sit in there, that kind of thing.
That's a great question. So we definitely are a very strong part of what we think of as the space ecosystem. So satellites, satellite operators, analytic providers, all sorts of launch vehicles. There's so much technology that is in space, and we focus on the software part. So we sit right between all of the providers, and we take advantage of all of the wonderful work that they do to, the hard work to put satellites in space and operate them and get the data and bring it down to Earth. And you're right, Earth observation has its eyes on Earth. And so we're a very strong part of that space ecosystem where we're sitting in the middle of all the providers, and then the customers, the users, the end users are on the other side, and that is who we're serving. So, Earth observation, looking at what's going on in the world, there's a lot of remote places that are hard to get to. And with satellites, you have no boundaries about where you can look. So on the Earth. So that's where we sit in the Earth observation world.
That makes sense. And I think another thing that I think of when I think of sort of like the different I guess like segments or parts of this like specific industry is at least one of the words that I hear is analytics. And so I guess, is that to you the same as geospatial AI, or is geospatial AI sort of like a subset of that? How do you see it?
So geospatial AI is using AI techniques to support lots of different parts of what we try to do at Ursa Space. For example, we're using agents to guide the user interface with a customer so that a customer can, much like a chat interface, say in their own words what they want to do. What do they want to look at? When do they want to look at it? What problem are they really trying to solve? And we use agents, AI technologies to help us parse those queries. We also do things like automatically figure out, depending on what somebody says, like if somebody says, I want to know about Houston, Texas, then we automatically know by geocoding AI to create some sort of a boundary around Houston, Texas, or anywhere in the world that you might name, either by you might say 50 miles. What's been happening for construction 50 miles outside of Atlanta? And then we would go to that region and try to make sense of it. So there's a lot of different uses of AI technologies that, they're getting much better at understanding what is in a satellite image, whether it's an optical image or whether it's a radar image. They look, they can pick out certain things already. And then with training, there's, some people classify machine learning and neural networking and those kinds of approaches as AI as well. So I know that there's just a huge range of AI technologies that can be very useful when you're trying to create answers for a customer's problem.
That makes sense. I think maybe to take a step back, you've probably already answered this sort of in the introduction, but I might want to cover it in a bit more depth. I guess if you could maybe describe the problem or the problems, if you want, that Ursa is solving. I know you said essentially you're creating answers for what's happening in the world, and that essentially people that you're working with are looking for answers. But if you could maybe in like simpler terms or examples sort of talk about what that means, what these answers are, what people want to know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's a great question because it can be very abstract. I think the best way to explain it is through concrete examples. And one of the best examples is humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. So these are the natural disasters that happen all over the world. So we respond to earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, fire events. So if you think about those things, there are people on the ground who are trying to help get those areas back up on their feet, because when a disaster strikes, they're vulnerable. And so what we do is we provide situational awareness for those people who are on the ground trying to help. So if you think about a fire, you want to know, well, how large is the fire? Are there people there? Is it a populated area? Do you know where the roads are blocked? Do you know where you can get to a school or a hospital, or where you can take food and water if people are stranded? Do they have power? Are there communications operating there? I mean, there's just so many practical things that you can provide with Earth observation that help those teams on the ground. For example, in one of the recent hurricanes, there was a lot of flooded areas, and somebody wanted to land with a helicopter, so we could take a satellite image and figure out where are the landing sites that are appropriate for bringing a helicopter in, because disasters strike everywhere. You don't always have all of the information at your fingertips, and you need to know how to help. So that's a huge part of what we do at Ursa Space.
That makes sense. And it's obviously a great example of like the really powerful positive ways that this information can be used to really help people. I think one of the things that was sort of implied, at least in that example, is around. So I mean, I guess the way I see it is there's geospatial data, but there's also like a temporal component to this, right? And in various senses. But I think the one that is especially interesting with this example is essentially like, I guess latency, maybe for lack of the right word, or timeliness. And so I guess maybe if you could speak to that a little bit and sort of like how you consider that in the data, how you have been approaching this, how you try to deliver data in a timely manner, or when that's really important, those kinds of questions.
Well, you're very perceptive, because latency is the driver. Reducing latency is the driver for many of our customers that we need to support. And just looking back over my time at Ursa Space, when we first started working to try to get satellite imagery, it would take us maybe weeks to get an image. And now the vendors, there's so many satellite operators, there's automated ways of communicating with them. They typically have APIs in place now, application programming interface, that you can program a connection to the vendor. And more and more vendors are building larger constellations so that they're going over the Earth more frequently. And now we've gotten down to getting an image within an hour of when it was taken, which is an amazing feat, or even minutes sometimes if you're lucky. It really depends on where a satellite is in relation to the ground station and how quickly can you get it passed down. But latency is really important to commercial customers and government customers alike. Everyone wants information yesterday about what is going on. If it's a situation involving risk, or some kind of financial decision that people need to make. We had an occasion one time where there was a landslide at a mine, and someone, one of our customers wanted to know, well, is the mine going to recover, or should we divest of our interest in this? And they needed to know by the time the market closed. So there are all sorts of questions that can be answered through this technology. Another case is sometimes if there's a fire at a refinery, you might want to know, well, when is that refinery coming back online? And there are certain patterns of life that you can detect. You can see a lot of construction vehicles there, and then maybe you don't see them anymore, and there's cars in the parking lot from the employees. So, there's certain indicators that we look for in answering these questions.
It makes a lot of sense. I feel like you've talked to a lot of examples. I was wondering, this is maybe somewhat tangential, Are there like use cases, or maybe if you could pick one use case or example that you think like to a general audience is like very interesting or surprising or sort of unexpected? Do you have one like that? It's okay if not. You can keep going.
Well, I think it's often surprising what customers need. I think that is the exciting thing is to be able to try to address a customer's problem that you may not have tried to solve before.
That makes sense. Yeah. So it's normally interesting, and it's not to say that the examples you gave aren't interesting. They certainly are. Just wondering if you had like a pet one. I think one thing. So I mean, we've at Empire Space been fortunate to have this have a conversation with Ursa Space before, right? And so I would say we've been exposed to Ursa Space over time. So we've gotten to see sort of how you've adapted and how the industry's been changing, which has been very interesting. So I wanted to spend a little time talking about like industry trends where we are today versus where we were before, because it's obviously interesting to us because we've been talking to you for some time, but it's also, I think, just especially in Earth observation, analytics, intelligence, it's a very different industry than it was even a few years ago. So yeah, I mean, I have like some broad questions. I think one of mine is like, how are you mentioned essentially how customer needs are very interesting. So I guess my question is like, how have customer needs been evolving? How do they look different today than they did even a couple of years ago? What are they asking for now that they weren't before? Yeah.
Well, it's funny. So, people tend to think that what they see on television and movies might be actually possible. So a lot of it is educating people about what is not possible. And when you see a satellite pretending to zoom in on someone and follow them, it's the satellites are moving around the earth. They're not gonna stop and take a video of someone, right? So I think part of it is customers. I think the industry is now catching up to some of the customer expectations about what's possible. And several years ago, we had a customer who wanted to know, every minute of every day and every night, what was going on at this location. And it's like, well, that's just not exactly possible. So with all of the things that are the technology that's available in all of the modalities, you might have balloons and sensors that that are stable and that you could do something like watch a location 24 hours, but it would have to be in an environment where that was allowed, because in a contested environment you probably wouldn't, the balloon wouldn't be up there for long, right? So it really, I don't know if I'm getting away from the question you asked, but the industry trends, I think we're trying to solve the problem several years ago of just getting access to the data. And what you had is the people who really knew how to use the data and do analytics on the data were happy to get the data, get satellite imagery and things like that. Now, with the ability to use all of these improved, more advanced technologies were able to actually provide actionable insight to people. And so it makes it possible for more people who don't have to have the expertise to actually use the data themselves to get the answers they need. And it's expanding the market for people who can take advantage of all of this technology.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So I guess the trend is essentially, it used to be along the lines of brokering data, more or less, and we've trended in the direction of analytics and actually providing answers to people. Right. I guess maybe to ask you, this is I guess a curiosity, but do you have a perspective on where you think this is going? Like sort of what's next in this trend? Do you see it sort of following, like, I don't know, the trends in AI and this becoming more like agentic, or sort of where do you see the future of this trend around I guess what the customer is looking for and the solutions that are provided?
The exciting thing to me, so I love problems. And I think problems are gifts, because if you're not doing something hard, you're not creating value. And so I really like the fact that we're addressing hard problems, and we are trying to make things very simple, especially for an end user to be able to access the information they need and get the answers they need. It's often tricky when you make things look too simple, because then people don't realize how hard it is for you to do what you do. But at the same time, I think that, I mean, everybody knows the pace of the AI advancements, and it's just incredible how they have improved every few months, and continue to provide tools and capabilities that can make these kinds of answers easier to obtain for people. So you mentioned AI. There's other things in space technologies that I think are going to help reduce latency as well. So when you think of processing on board a satellite and getting a quick answer on a satellite and bringing that down, or if you think about communication between satellites, so that with communications technology and networking, in space, you don't have to wait for a particular satellite to be over a ground station so that it can send the data down to the Earth. You can send it to another satellite that's over the ground station, very quickly. So it's those kinds of technologies that I think are just going to improve the ability to get information more quickly, and in some ways more cost effectively too.
That makes sense. I do want to come back on the AI topic. I feel like, I mean, for us, we're very space focused at Empire Space, and so we do talk to a lot of companies, but I would say not too many of the companies we talk to are so deeply involved in software. And so for many of them, they're still a bit away from being deeply impacted by these trends in AI, where that's not true here. So it's very interesting to talk to someone who's really in it. So I want to come back to it, but I think we've been talking about latency to some extent. I must admit, so I at one point in time, I worked at a company that was trying to build like data relay services. So I actually understand this part a little bit. And so, at least from my memory, that the two variables are essentially latency and throughput, are at least the two most important ones, right? And you mentioned, for lack of the word that you used, you mentioned sort of like new technologies coming online, things like edge processing and like satellite satellite to satellite communications, those kinds of things. So I guess my question to you is, in addition to the trends we've talked about around latency, I guess, are there any interesting trends that you want to highlight around sort of throughput or how much data we have to get down from these satellites to the ground? Do you see this as becoming less of a problem with edge compute, or sort of what's your perspective on it?
So in terms of throughput, some of the images can be huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where the combination, and you might not be able to get a whole image downlinked in one pass. So you have to wait for the whole, the whole orbit to occur again before you can get it fully downlinked. And so that causes time delay. So the edge computing on the satellite could reduce the size if you're only looking for a detection of something and not the whole image.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a real hurry and you want to know, is there a certain vessel, out in the ocean somewhere that you're trying to figure out where it is, and you don't want a whole image of open water. You just want to know where that vessel is. And so things like that, when you can reduce the amount of data that you need to bring down, that can, that solves your throughput problem. Or if you break it up and you send it out over multiple satellites and can downlink. I mean, there's infinite number of ways that you can skin that cat, but
that makes sense. It's very exciting. I think all these developments around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'll go back to the industry trends, and I think so. There's probably two, at least to me, that are I would imagine very impactful within this specific segment. We've talked about AI some. We could definitely talk more about it. I was wondering if for the other one, I mean, there's been a lot of geopolitical activity, right? And I would say a lot of that has been leveraging or in some cases depending on Earth observation, data, intelligence, analytics, right? So I guess for you, how do you sort of see like the world today and sort of its dependence on this industry? How has it maybe changed demand from your perspective? Is it like really like a surging demand within the segment? Or is it just sort of like a different state of things? And yeah, does that make sense?
I'm not completely sure. I mean, there's so much going on in the world. There's constant demand.
Mm-hmm.
So demand for information. Yeah.
That makes sense.
We can go back and talk about AI a little bit more. So, we talked about the role of AI in Earth observation, and you can think about it in, I briefly talked about it at the beginning, analyzing and understanding imagery. We're getting really good at that with AI techniques. And, I think there's been a lot of talk about how AI is very useful in speeding up a software development cadence and using AI tools to help code and solve problems. So we're definitely getting a lot better at using AI assisted tools for software development, and then using these agent technologies to really help the user interface in a much more conversational way. So those are kind of three basic pillars of the kinds of AI techniques that we use at Ursa Space.
That makes sense. I think that there's been obviously tons in our world. There's been tons of talk around AI. You've mentioned, I guess, like a few different use cases, sort of internal use cases, and then also sort of like external and sort of how you interface your products to customers and to outside of Ursa. I guess for me, one of my questions, obviously there's lots on the horizon with AI. As you said, there's like huge changes happening every few months. So I guess maybe like, what are you looking forward to as far as what's on the horizon with these AI developments, and sort of how it may be able to make either work inside Ursa better or make your products better?
Yeah, so it's really adding value in imagery understanding. I think I'm looking forward to overcoming some of the issues that currently exist. So it's kind of overhyped in a sense that I talked about automatically translating requests from a user to look at a certain area. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it kind of goes off the rails. So I'm looking forward to that being improved. So the other thing that I'm finding that the AI technologies don't have a really strong sense of is time.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there's a lot of ways to express time. So you could say recently, or in the spring, or in the fall, like it needs that context of, well, what time is it now? And what are you talking about? Right. So those kinds of things are, it almost, there's almost a kind of coaching that's needed for the user of these systems to be able to create a good prompt and to create a good problem. So we're trying to create the guardrails and help people use our tools most effectively.
I think another part of it within AI is also, and this has been evolving, but I think to me this is still probably one of the biggest issues within AI is essentially trust, which you've sort of touched on, right? There's different kinds of trust, right? There's trusting that it's going to be able to autonomously create the outputs you're expecting, but then there's also trusting that your data is being handled correctly, it's not being shared, right? So there's like a lot of elements to the trust around these AI tools. So I guess from your perspective, like what does it take for AI in this sense, whether it's internal or sort of your external tools, what does it take for this to actually be trusted?
So that's a great question. And we are in the middle of validation of a lot of different aspects of our product. And part of it is, just the state of where we are now with AI tools. And, if you are an expert and it gives you something and you can recognize what the problem is, in the response, you know, it's okay to correct it, and you know, it will yeah, and just in my own personal use of AI technologies, I've found that if I give it bad, if I lead it in the wrong direction, it will happily go there. So, so the question is how, you know, how can we create the guardrails on the prompts that we're using to solve somebody's problem?
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, so this was, I think I can't find it right now, but I think I had a similar but different question or sort of suggestion here, which is like, to me, trust is, especially as someone who's building these products, it's also about essentially trusting the organization. And it's also about sort of trusting that there are experts, like you said, at that organization who are verifying and training these tools correctly, right? So obviously, Ursa has been around for a good amount of time, as you mentioned at the top. Your customers trust you, your partners trust you, right? So that's a huge part of it, is essentially a trust in your organization, and that essentially your experts are going to make sure that the results are correct. So yeah, that all makes sense to me. I think maybe similar but slightly different to what I just said is, obviously Ursa's been in New York for this whole time, which has been a long time for a New York-based company. So I guess maybe could you, and you know, this is Space Week New York, so we have to talk about New York a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about what it means to build a company like Ursa in New York? You know, maybe why you did it, how it's been, strengths that New York brings to your specific company, that kind of thing.
Well, we initially ended up in New York because of Cornell University. And at the very beginning, we were building satellites, and there in upstate New York, there is a very strong sensors group. So the Air Force Research Laboratory in Rome, New York, used to be the Sensors Directorate, and so a lot of companies around upstate New York have had sprung up and were building, you know, sensors, and we were primarily interested in synthetic aperture radar. And there are a couple of very strong sensors companies in upstate New York. So the resources is one, and then all of the university talent that is in upstate New York. You've got Cornell. They do have a small sat group, and they're very active in space education in lots of different areas. RIT, just, you know, just a lot of talent. And also the cost of living in upstate New York is a lot less than it is in the Bay Area. So that is one reason why Adam Maher came to Ithaca to start the company in the first place. And in the fall of 2014, Cornell, Ithaca College, and TC3 came together to build a startup incubator called Rev Startup Works. And so there were resources, business advisors, all sorts of really great resources for a company just starting out. And the investment that we receive from investors in New York and on the East Coast, Washington, D.C., area thing, that is really important. And we were able to attract folks in Ithaca at the very beginning. What happened in COVID is, when everyone was forced to stay home, we transitioned to a remote company in just a couple of days. It was not a difficult thing for us. And we started hiring, talent all over the US. And that kind of helps us because we serve customers all over the world and we needed people in different time zones. So, so that's, I think being in New York has been a great thing for Ursa Space. It's not too far to Europe as well.
I think I found the startup incubator that you were mentioning.
Right. Ithaca.
If I did find it correctly, I put it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
For others. That's a great story. It makes a lot of sense. I think it touches on a lot of the strengths that we talk about when we talk about essentially why there is a space ecosystem in New York, and the different ways that companies and stakeholders can leverage it. I think Ursa's story certainly fits in very well. But it's great to hear like the actual story from such a successful New York space company. We have like 15 minutes left here. I had maybe like a couple more questions and we'll leave time for audience Q&A at the end. I think so. My last questions, they're more so like forward looking. Just wondering maybe what people should be expecting or looking forward to, any milestones, capabilities, areas of growth that you're excited about at Ursa that you want to like tell everyone about.
Well, I'm really excited about our new platform that I've kind of talked about throughout the time with you this afternoon. And we're in the process, as I said, of validating and testing and getting it ready for launch later this year. And the people that are using it now, we have some external testers who are looking at it, and it's just receiving a lot of excitement. And I really can't wait to share it with everyone.
Cool. Is it the same onboarding process that exists today, or sort of how does someone get exposure to using this platform?
So we have some trusted partners who are testing it for us, and when we launch later in the year, Evan, I'll make sure that you're informed so that you can find out more about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's exciting.
Cool. I think the other question that we've become at Empire Space quite focused on workforce development lately. And so I think one of my questions is around sort of like talent and skills, and sort of from the perspective of your company, like, are you hiring right now? What are you looking for? What kinds of talent and skills is Ursa generally most interested in? Someone's super interested in your company, how should they be preparing to join, that kind of thing?
So we have a real interdisciplinary team. We have all the business processes that, you would imagine, finance and HR, sales and contracts, and but we're very deep technically, and we have several parts of the company. One is more operational, and these are the intelligence analysts and the GIS specialists who really understand the bringing together of all of these data sources in an all source kind of way, and guide us in developing tools that will support them. and we have a software engineering team that we're in the process of building. I think that is one of the growth areas for the company. So in terms of hiring, we're looking for folks who have some AI assisted coding experience. And that being said, we we have no shortage of problems in all aspects of computer science, networking, security, cloud systems, cloud platforms, just, so if you're interested in Ursa Space, definitely reach out. I think we'll be posting a new job description pretty soon. And then we also have our analytics team that works with more on the data end, making sense of imagery and building algorithms to do things like object detection and classification and change detection, things like that. So these are highly skilled scientists and data scientists who know how to work with big data. Awesome. And then we also have, so my role right now is I'm actually leading all of the supply chain work for the company, working with all of the many vendors that support us all over the world and creating these agreements and working with our satellite collections team to make sure that we have the right agreements in place.
That's all sounds great. I guess as you have that information available for those new postings, feel free to send them over to us at Empire Space. We'll be happy to promote them. We've been working on our side on doing a better job of aggregating and sharing opportunities across the ecosystems. This is a project that's been ongoing, but we'd love to make sure that any opportunities at Ursa are being shared with our network. So that's all great to hear. I think the last question I had for you, which is like essentially very broad, but just like anything else that you wanted to share with the audience here, any audience who might be listening later, anything that these listeners should know, keep an eye out for, anything that you're looking for, like an ask to the community, anything like that.
I think just always feel free to reach out if you have a problem that you think that Earth observation and what Ursa Space is doing can solve. We're very interested in learning about the kinds of things that people need in order to make their lives better.
Awesome. Sounds great. I guess to those who are here, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. You could also raise your hand and speak however you want to do it. We'll give a little time for people to send their questions or raise their hands. If no one has any questions, we'll close it up pretty soon here. But I think for our end, like on the Empire Space side, while people might be putting their questions together, just wanted to make sure that, for those listening, there's still a lot more of Space Week. So we're just on Tuesday here. There are events throughout the day tomorrow, both virtual and in person. And then we have a lot more programming throughout the week. So if you're, and we also have events that are happening all around the state this year, which is pretty fantastic. So regardless of where you are, if you want to come to an in-person event, or if you want to attend more virtual events, please check out our calendar, spaceweeknewyork.com. You're able to find the schedule there. And yeah, so we hope to see you at many more events throughout the week. You too, Julie, in case you want to come to anything else. We don't have any other questions. Julie, is there anything else you want to say to sort of like concluding thoughts?
Well, I think that the kind of work that we're doing is very gratifying. So if you're looking for meaningful work, it's very gratifying to be able to contribute these kinds of answers that help people. And I would highly recommend whatever you're doing, if you're thinking about going into a career like this. You know, I certainly came to it later in life, and I just find it fascinating and gratifying work, and it's a privilege to serve with the other folks at Ursa Space. So thank you again, Evan, for inviting me to talk about Ursa Space. And yeah, I'm wish you the rest of the week is good as well.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. It looks like we don't have any other questions, so we'll wrap it up here. Thanks so much, Julie. We really appreciate it. Really value the partnership and you continuing to engage and be a part of this community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.